Gig Gab, episode 443 for Monday, August 19th, National Potato Day, but it's also World Photo Day, and I wonder if these two things can go together. 2024. Greetings, folks, and welcome to Gig Gab, the show by, for, and about working musicians here on National Potato Day and World Photo Day. Our sponsor is Bandzoogle, where you can use promo code GigGabPod to save 15% after you get to try it free for 30 days. We'll have a link for you in the show notes, and we'll talk more about it in a little bit. But for now, here, it's just me in Durham, New Hampshire. I'm Dave Hamilton. I have been overdoing it to myself on the gigs front. I think my wife would also agree with that. But and I figured it was time to take a little breather together and talk about some of these gigs that I've been doing, talk about what we've been doing with the show. And when I say we, I mean all of us, because we're all kind of in this together. And so I want to share some things with you. I've got some gear gabs, some new microphones to talk about and play for you. I've got some listener feedback based on some recent episodes. In fact, a question for you and then some future stuff. But I wanted to take a minute and just talk about some of these gigs and kind of the crazy July that I had and some of the stories from all of these because, things get nuts. In July, I played... Well, like I said, I've been overdoing it this summer. I played so many gigs. We saw so many shows. And this all started because I didn't really play a whole lot in the first 5 months of the year. And I got nervous, as I said. And so I put out some feelers and the feelers came back. So not only does Bitter Pill heat up in the summer, that's generally when Bitter Pill plays. Summer, a little bit in the fall, but that's really it. The winter and even the spring is where we spend a lot of time working on new tunes and recording, if we're going to do any recording that particular year. But that's when kind of all of that happens so that we have new stuff for the summer for the shows that we do. And we've been playing some great shows. I think I mentioned the show that we did at this Vernon Family Farm outdoor venue. They provided their own sound and really nice place in the middle of this farm. People came and hung out and they had food and like beer and drinks and stuff. And we had a sub guitar player. We had our friend Jay Fortin, who we've known for years. He had never played with us before, but he did a great job and really learn the tunes. And it's always interesting hearing how somebody else reinterprets, especially, the originals of a band. But he's been there. Like, he takes a lot of photographs of the band. A lot of the photos that you see of Bitter Pill have been taken by Jay and some other people are, really kind of the focus of what we do with photos there. So he knows the band, and I think that helped quite a bit, even though I don't even think we got a rehearsal together. He might have gotten together with Billy, but I don't think we got a rehearsal together. And it worked. It worked out great. And then we played that radio station gig with Bitter Pill. And that was interesting. They had us on the air. Never put a podcaster on FCC-approved airwaves because we're bound to say things that you're not supposed to say, even though I don't say those kinds of things on the show. It's just how it comes out. But we played that gig with another band that worked out really well. That gig was interesting. They told us, oh yeah, when we've played there before, and they have an analog mixer, 16 channel. I think it's an old Mackie. It doesn't really matter. It's kind of your typical, the mixer that a band would typically have had 15 years ago, right? Where it's an analog mixer. It might have some built-in EQ and effects, like rudimentary EQ and effects, and it's, of the 16 channels, 12 of them have XLR inputs, and then there's 4 that are combo or stereo inputs for quarter-inch only, and but it worked. The mixer has worked out fine in the past, and they've had a sound engineer there. And when we got there, they told us arrive at whatever time for load in, and this is the time for sound check, and then this is the time you do the radio interview, and then this is the time the band start. Okay, great. No problem. Sounds good. So we get ourselves set up, and, we like to help out, so we're starting to kind of run some cables to microphones and just make that part easy. And finally, one of us thought to ask, hey, do we have an engineer tonight, or are we mixing it ourselves? They're like, no, you're mixing it yourself. It's like, oh, okay. So had we known that, I think I probably would have brought my digital mixer in from the car to make life a little smoother. But by that point, we were kind of like in it and wired into that mixer. And certainly we could have pulled things out, but we just sort of dealt with it. It was fine. Like it actually worked out great. We had the sound good and everything just, kind of went, but it was just one of those things like, really? Okay. I mean, it was funny that they gave us a list of like, here's the load in time, here's sound check. And then it's like, oh, but you're on your own for that. Like, all right. But it worked out well. And then we knew we were doing our own sound at this. Well, actually we played 2 gigs last Saturday. We played at a festival in the afternoon, this Berwick Lawn Chair Festival. We were contracted to play 30 minutes. We played all of 24. They paid us the same. They were the schedule. They wanted to keep things moving with the festival, but that was fine. Super hot outside, as it has been in New England. It's either been like super hot or pouring, and so that day it was super hot. And then we left from there, packed up all our gear, drove about 12 minutes to a club called Auspicious Brew in Dover, New Hampshire, and loaded in there and set up. And that we knew we were doing the sound on our own. It's a very cool place. It's kind of like it has sort of a living room vibe, if you will. And they are their own kombucha. They brew their own kombucha there. And then they have a kitchen where they serve food. Like I got a yummy like barbecue chicken grilled cheese there, which is actually really great. And their kombucha's good and fun and all that stuff. And so we got set up. We did our own sound. We did all the things that I talked about in the Digital Mixers 101 episode that I did a couple of weeks ago. And in fact, my wife, who often runs faders for us, listened to that episode and was like, I think I want to like try some of these things and mess with gains or whatever. And we had an acoustic guitar player, singer-songwriter kind of thing start before us, which was perfect because I was able to sort of be there with her while she tuned that. And man, thank goodness that room was super weird, and it wasn't just set it and forget it. She was adjusting EQs and levels and really kind of all kinds of things all night just to make the room work and to keep levels, kind of in that 95 dB range or below. And it worked out really well. So I know she got a lot out of that Digital Mixer 101 episode. And I know a lot of you did too, because I've heard from you. In fact, we've got some feedback coming from it, and we'll do another episode about it too. But that was all, that was just Bitter Pill. And then of course I sandwiched those gigs in. Lisa and I went to see some Fish shows, which were fun. We saw the Sammy Hagar Best of All Worlds tour. Man, if you are into that, like they're playing all old Van Halen songs on this tour mostly, with Joe Satriani handling all the guitars, and then Jason Bonham on drums, and Michael Anthony, of course, bass and those killer harmonies, and Ray, I can't remember his last name. It's this very Australian name, playing keys and singing harmonies, and that three of them sing really well together. So that was an enjoyable sort of thing. But in the midst of that, because I had reached out to lots of people, I also wound up playing some gigs with some sub gigs with various friends, and I finally was able to play in Heartland Radio. I subbed in that band, and that is a friend of the show, Dallas Corbin. He's been on the show a couple times, a.k.a. Dave Brunyak, guitar player from Pink Talking Fish. He started his country / Dallas Corbin / Heartland Radio thing, and though we had been rained out several times, we made it and played this gig. It poured right before we played. It poured just after we played, but the clouds parted for us and got to play a nice hour-long kind of power hour set at the Scituate Heritage Days Festival down in Scituate, Massachusetts. Really fun playing with that band. I'm sure I'll sub with them some more. In fact, I'm scheduled to sub with them tomorrow. Well, it'll be the Friday before this episode comes out because I'm recording this on Thursday. But that went well. That was the gig where I read the whole thing down, and I think, in fact, you'll hear me talk more about that in an upcoming episode too. But yeah, I did not have time to memorize all of these songs, and I found, as I mentioned, on Ultimate Guitar that you can just download drum charts, and not like drum sheet music, which thankfully I know how to read. And so probably half the gig, I wound up just reading down the charts. And I asked my wife out there, I was like, was it obvious? I'm like, I know I was reading, but, was I like glued in? I was trying not to be. And she's like, no, you were like, it was obvious that she's like, I knew that occasionally you were looking at the charts, but it's like always be performing, right? So really fun band to play with. All those, I like playing that sort of, tight rock poppy country stuff. It's so much of it reminds me of power pop. I mean, it's got hooky little riffs and great tight harmonies that are really up front. Great. They're just great little pop songs. And I find playing them is a lot of fun. But it is challenging because they have lots of stops and starts and switch to halftime for one verse here or half a verse here and go do this and then stop on a dime so that the vocalist can deliver the punchline of the song and then you're back in. Like that kind of stuff is where it gets really, really tricky. And so thankfully I was able to find those charts and make it work. This weekend, which will be the weekend before this episode comes out, I have done it to myself again. I have, on Friday afternoon, I have a Heartland Radio gig down at Friday evening, I guess, down at one of these like town square sort of festival things in Massachusetts. Then I motor back home towards Portsmouth, where at midnight that same night I play Rocky Horror, which I've been rehearsing all week at the Seacoast Rep Theater. And then Saturday afternoon, Bitter Pill is playing at the Stone Jack Ball Festival at 2:00 for 2 hours. And then so that's 2 to 4. And then I have a 6 p.m. downbeat about 70 minutes away with Monkey Fist in Manchester, New Hampshire. The band knows. So and they can play without me. And I think they might start without me, depending on how quickly I'm able to get out of the Stone Jack Ball. But it'll make it fun, right? With all that, I have joined a new band. I found a new band. I mentioned it when I was talking to Mike Schulte, but I didn't want to mention the name yet because there were some things. I started looking on Craigslist and found several things. I went and auditioned with some people, as I mentioned, and kind of just, was really deliberate about, okay, like this was sort of fun or a lot of fun, but is it the right, it's got to be the right people. They've got to be able to play. Like that's step one. But pretty much everybody that I went and auditioned with could play. So that was fine. They got to be the right people to be able to get along with. And that also that box was fairly easily checked with everybody I auditioned with. But really, I was looking for something that is a band that, well, to be candid, a band that understands the always be performing aspect of what we talk about here. I didn't just want to join a band that was playing for the sake of just saying they went and set up in a bar and played. I've done enough of that. It can be fun when you're with the right people, but when you're with people that are just like staring at their shoes all night, it's a lot to really, I feel like then I have to step up and carry the night, and I don't mind being a part of carrying the night, but I want everybody to perform. Live music, what did Paul Kent say all the time? Live music is a visual art. So be visual about it. Perform. Understand that you are engaging with the audience, not just sonically, but also visually. And so I went through a lot of stuff. And as part of this Craigslist thing, one of the ads that sparked my interest was a guy who had posted that he was looking to form an all-male Taylor Swift tribute band. Yes, Mike Schulte, it's happening. And so I was like, oh, that's interesting. Like, this person gets that you put a band together for a reason, and, you know, you create a vibe and all those things. And I have the original thing, you know, that box is checked for me with both Bitter Pill, and though Fling is in somewhat of a hiatus still, there's a offshoot of Fling that Russ and I are doing with actually John Donahue from Monkey Fist and Gary, who I don't think I've ever talked about on the show, a little thing called Vegan Meathead. And so the original thing is checked. I mean, if the right opportunity shows up, I would happily collaborate with people, but I was looking for a cover band. I lost the wedding band, and so I was like, all right, this is good. And I talked to the guy for a little while, and was like, oh man, like, we're in lockstep on a lot of these things. It's like, all right, we should get together to play. And he's like, yeah, I have another band that plays out once or twice a month, and we just replaced our drummer and bass player. And so, a couple months ago, so I'm still kind of have to prioritize that. But once I get that up and running, again, he's like, we're about a month away from that sort of being back in like autopilot. Maybe isn't the right term, but you know what I mean. And he's like, then we'll get together and we'll do this. I'm like, okay, sounds good. Keep in touch. And I just sort of, as the conversation was wrapping up, I said, it's too bad that we didn't meet, whatever, 2 months ago, 3 months ago, 6 months, whatever it was, when you were looking for a drummer. Cause like, that's kind of the thing that I, started out looking for. And he paused and he's like, wait, are you still looking for that? I'm like, well, yeah, if the right opportunity comes up. He's like, yeah, cause I don't know that it's going to, like, that this drummer's going to want to stay in the band and this, that, and the other thing. He's like, I'm not sure if we're right for him. And I was like, oh, well, okay. And so that's Casual Gravity. And that's the band that I have joined. I have yet to play with them. Everybody knows about this now, so I can talk about it on the show and I can name the name of the band, but I'll play with them for the first time on August, I think, 30th or 31st, or maybe both. Generally plays once or twice a month. This particular weekend, which they rarely do 2 gigs a weekend, which I also kind of liked based on the way my life works. This particular weekend, they opted to do 2 because of the opportunities or whatever. But they say, and I've looked at their schedule, they're true to their word. They say it happens about once a year. I'm like, okay, that's fine. Like, I get it. We all get it. That's how it works. So yeah, I will have more to say about that. It's a cover band playing, it's 4-piece cover band, guitar, bass, drums, and a vocalist, Tom, who plays guitar maybe 5 songs out of the night where it needs to kind of be filled in or whatever. But they play really well. The set list is kind of harder edged rock. So you got like your, Van Halen and Rat and some Poison in there, Skid Row. Tom can hit all of those notes with the lead vocals. Guitar player really has that 80s. Jeff, he has that 80s kind of crunch to it. So, and he plays they all play really well. So I'm looking forward to this band. I think the one thing that it needs to kind of put it over the top is harmonies, which I bring to the table. The other 2 guys, the bass player and guitar player, also can sing, and I think we can arrange some harmonies together that'll work out, really kind of giving this band a nice shine. They perform well. They have a YouTube series called Casual Chronicles, which is just the band goofing off and doing things, but it's got a storyline to it and all of that stuff. And they've got signs and posters and all kinds of stuff. Like, they get it. And so I think I've made a good choice with this, but I'll keep you posted as time progresses, because that's what we do here. All right, folks, listen. As you know, today's episode is brought to you by our friends and our sponsor at Bandzoogle, the secret sauce behind our Fling Rocks Records website. Yup, you heard that right. We've used Bandzoogle for years, and it's so flexible that we turned our simple band site for Fling into this full-blown record label platform with multiple pages and all that stuff. And I love that Bandzoogle was able to evolve with us as we evolved. If that's not always be performing, I don't know what is. Bandzoogle makes it easy to build a stunning website in minutes. You need to sell your music, your merch, or your tickets? They've got you covered. Commission free. And with industry-ready EPK features, smart links, custom landing pages, and mailing list tools, you can stay connected with your fans like never before. And let's be real, social media integrations make sure your fans know what you're up to 24/7 without having to sacrifice your precious rehearsal time. Plans start at just $8.29 a month, including hosting and your own custom domain name. That's less than a new set of sticks. Seriously, drumsticks are expensive. Ready to always be performing? Well, head over to bandzoogle.com to try it free for 30 days and then use promo code GigGabPod to get 15% off the first year. I'm going to link all this from giggabpodcast.com right in the show notes so you can click through. But just so you remember, that's bandzoogle.com, promo code GigGabPod, all one word. Get your band's online game rocking and keep the music going. And my thanks to Bandzoogle for sponsoring this episode. All right, let's switch gears a little bit. Thank you for that. And keep me posted about your gigs too. Feedback at giggabpodcast.com. I want to know what you're up to when you've got interesting evolutions. Like, these are the stories that I think we all like to kind of talk about. I always say, whatever is boring at a cocktail party but is great in the green room that works, that's what we do here. Listener Mike has rejoined at the Gig Gab family and had a lot of questions, in fact, about digital. Man, why is this difficult for me to say today? Digital Mixer 101 episode that we did. So much so, and he wasn't the only one. Lots of you wrote in with sort of feedback and questions and suggestions about the next iteration of this. So we will be doing Digital Mixer 102. I'm not going to read all of Mike's questions about that right now because we're going to do that when we do DM 102. However, one of the things that Mike asked kind of in this stream of consciousness, he's like, I don't know what I don't know, which is great. We all like that. What a great place for all of us to start was, how do you talk to your sound engineer? Like he said, I've heard you say, you told the engineer, I need 3 dB more vocals in my mix. How did you know to say that? How did you know how much? And of course, usually you know what you need, but you know, what are the right things to say to an engineer to make things more efficient in the moment? And I always say that this starts before you need anything from the engineer. When you get to the club, introduce yourself. If you have any little snippets of helpful advice or helpful information, advice maybe not well received by someone that you just introduced yourself to, like, hey, let me give you some advice, but let me give you some helpful info about my band. And that could be a lot of different things, right? Every band is not exactly the same. There's a lot of similarities from band to band for a front of house engineer to sort of go with the normal flow. But you know what idiosyncrasies your band has. So, for example, with Bitter Pill, I know, and this isn't so much true anymore, but for a long time, Billy's cello, he plays cello most of the time as the role of the bass, it sounds great and it's fun and it's visually great and all the things. But occasionally he will pull out a Fender bass and play that on different songs. And for a long time, and now it's not so much this, but there's still a little bit of gap. The Fender bass was about 4 to 6 dB louder, hotter than the cello, but it would run through the same inputs. He just has an A/B switch on his pedal board, or maybe he just moved the cable between the two of them. Whatever it was the same input to the board, right? Billy's amp has a DI out on it. It's got an XLR jack on it, but even if you used a DI, it would be the same thing. It would the same signal running through the board. And I knew this, so I had to set up our board with the right amount of compression, as we talked about in Digital Mixer 101, to help mitigate that difference. And so I would use that as like, hey, I'd say, hey, the sound engineer, great to be working with you. I'm Dave. What's your name? Try to remember the sound engineer's name if you can. I'm always terrible at this. But go through that kind of thing and then say, hey, oh yeah, just as you're getting going, just so you know that, the bass, when he switches to the bass, it's going to be about, 5 to 6 dB hotter than normal, than the cello. And they love knowing that, especially when you can communicate it in their language. Now, in order for me to be able to communicate something like that in their language, I had to learn it. And so I had to look at our mixer, either at our own gig that we were doing our sound for or at a rehearsal, and say, hey, wait, play that. Okay, look where it hits. All right, switch to the other thing, play that. Okay, look where it hits. Okay, now I know this. Now I can share this with an engineer. And so those kinds of things are helpful. If you know something, like I also know now that Emily plays ukulele for a couple of songs. It needs all the gain you have. Like it's rare that we don't just crank the gain all the way up. It really should have some sort of a preamp or something. But, without that, I know that it needs all the gain. And so I share that little tidbit with sound engineers. Just something to actually give them, practical, helpful information and then get out of their way, right? Let them keep setting up. And so that, I find that really helps pave a nice path for the evening because it shows that we're all in this together and I want to help you. Similarly, though, how I know to ask for 3 more dB of vocals, well, I know intellectually, and I can share this with you so that we all know it intellectually, 3 decibels is double the perceived volume, generally speaking. So if I know, and usually 1 dB, especially coming out of a monitor wedge, but even in your ears, 1 dB, you might not hear the difference. 2 dB, probably hear the difference. But if it's not enough, you probably need at least 3 dB to make a noticed difference. And that's usually, and again, I just learned this from working with engineers over the years, be a sponge at gigs, just like listen to them, learn from them, ask them questions without being a pest. That's how I learned most of what I know, and that or trial and error. But, I've learned that that's a good amount to ask for. If I know that it's way too low, I'll say it's probably going to be 6 dB. And sometimes I'll ask that and, get a head cock from them. Like, are you sure? Yeah, I'm pretty sure. But no, you need to know what to ask for. So it's playing around at home. Set up your mixer at your house, plug a microphone into it and a speaker or headphones, and then just mess around with it so that you can learn the things. Think about what you needed at your last gig and then go replicate that. If it was, well, my bass sounded muddy. Okay, great. Well, what would you do to change that? Go do that, learn it. And then when you hear the same thing, in your ears at the next gig or whatever, and it's like, oh, the bass sounds muddy. Hey, can you drop out some, 80 hertz from that? It's sounding kind of muddy. Or if they don't want to drop out 80 hertz from the front of house, ask them to drop 80 hertz on the mix that's sent to your ears, right? That can be, or add 80 hertz, like whatever it is, whatever you want, learn how to do it and pay attention to the specifics of it so that you can communicate it talking in dB and hertz and all of the other terms that sound engineers use. Does that make sense? I hope it does. But it does require some experimenting and knowledge gathering, right? And I like, my brain gathers knowledge best by experimenting, trial and error, making mistakes, learning from them. We're not all the same. Some people's brains work really well gaining information just by reading, and that's great too. Like, find your path to learn these things and then learn just enough so that you can ask a question at the gig and maybe you'll get more information. Like if you ask the sound engineer, hey, drop 80 dB, I don't think that's what you want. I think maybe you want like 120 dropped. And it's like, okay, let's try that. Be willing to experiment, and that will make for simply a better experience, because now you're collaborating with this person when sometimes it's a role where, musician and sound engineer can battle each other. That's never fun for anybody. So starting the relationship off with some helpful advice and then respectfully asking for the things that you need and should get you there. So hope that makes sense. If you've got any questions, email me, feedback@giggabpodcast.com. I really love hearing from you. I love that we have this community here that we've all kind of built up over, depends on how long you've been with us. I've been doing this, Gig Gab thing for almost 10 years now. However long, if you've been with us 10 minutes, great. Welcome. If you've been with us 10 years, great. Welcome. Glad to have you. It's all good. Whenever you joined, we love having you. So thanks so much. I mentioned Gear Gab. I'm a sucker for microphones. As you know, if you've listened long enough, I have learned that when the folks at Earthworks tell me you're going to like this better than what you're currently using, I listen to them. The first shining example of that is the podcast microphone that I am using. It is a condenser microphone. I would never use a condenser microphone for podcasting, except that I have been using one for 3 years or something. It's this Ethos. I think that's what it's called, the Ethos. I get confused between the Ethos and the Icon, but I think the Icon's the USB version. The Ethos is the XLR. It's such a great, it just sounds good for me. And so they know my preferences. And of course, recently we talked about the SR117 snare drum mic, which really they market as a vocal handheld mic. And it is a great vocal handheld mic until you try it on the snare drum. And then you don't want to give it to a singer ever again because you want to have it on your snare drum. Well, that microphone, folks, has been replaced in my arsenal. The SR117 can go back to a vocalist because Earthworks just came out. And it's a great mic on a vocalist, by the way. Delicious. Just came out with what they called their DK6, which is a 6-piece drum microphone kit. It's $1,500. I know that that's way more expensive than the $100 pile kit that you can buy on Amazon. There are reasons why, but for $1,500, it compared to any other 6 microphone drum mic kit from a vendor that is more than just pile or whatever. That pricing fits it, and the mics in this kit are absolutely fantastic. So there are 2 overhead mics that are I knew I needed to have this up in front of me here. I don't have it up in front of me. Why don't I have it up in front of me? There we are. So the DK6 kit has 3. The overhead mics, sorry, getting back to those, are SR20 SP Gen 2. So these are condenser mics that have a cardioid pattern, 155 dB, which is sound pressure level, which is what you need for being close to drums, and so articulate, so just clear, and they reproduce drums without pulling a lot of it. The pattern on them is really interesting. That cardioid pattern, it really works. Cardioid being, well, it's called cardioid because it's the shape of a heart. And so it's not picking up things behind it. It's picking up only a little bit of things on the side. It's picking up, in general, what's in front of it. I don't want to say just what it's aimed at. We'll get to that in a minute. But that which is in front of it. And it really, they sound great. I've tried them on their own, and I've tried them in a stereo pair, and they, perform exactly as you would. I'm going to save the second one for a minute because that's my favorite. Although the DM6 is the kick drum mic in here. I've had this kick drum mic for a little while. In fact, they didn't even send me one. They sent me sort of the rest of the kit to make it all work out. But I've had this DM6 for a little while. This is a super cardioid pattern, which means it's an even tighter version of a heart. And it really does only pick up the things that are pretty much directly in front of it, which when you're putting a mic into the hole of a kick drum or inside a kick drum aimed at the beater, that's a good thing. There's going to be so much air moving in there that the element, the capsule of the microphone is going to activate, and you're going to get that low end air that happens with just air movement. So what's nice about this is it's got such articulation that like you need very little, if any, EQ on it. It just really depends on what you need to compensate for from your kick drum itself. It's again, 150 dB sound pressure level, so it can obviously it's built to go inside a kick drum. It's a tight little form factor, and it screws right into a mic stand, and then you plug your XLR in, and you're off to the races. So I know I went through those two pretty quickly. They are not to be glossed over. They are absolutely fantastic. In fact, we'll probably do some demos of the DM6 in a little bit here. But the one that really jumped out to me was the DM17, which they call the tom/snare mic. And I would agree with this. This thing, it answers it's everything I've ever wanted. So to me, it sounds the same as that SR117, which by the name makes a lot of sense. It's the DM17, but it's a short barrel little thing. And it's got just it's got a built-in clamp that I'll talk about in a minute, but it's a short barrel little mic. So it stays out of the way when you put it on the kit, either, on a tom or on the snare. Sounds delicious. Let's talk about the sound here for a second. So here is my Gretsch Brooklyn snare drum, which is a maple and poplar drum. It's got some honk to it, which I think is kind of a nice thing to test out a microphone. So here is that drum with an SM57, placed right over the rim, kind of aimed. But both these mics had basically the same placement. So here is the 57. So, sounds like a snare drum. Okay, great, fine. And I really like, at the moment I'm listening on my ears, which is where I hear my drums live. But it's, it sounds the same out of a speaker. You're used to what a 57 sounds like. So there's our level set. Let's just do that one more time, and then I'll jump right to the DM17. Same, this is the 57 still. And now. It's got that little, it's the same little magic punch that I heard in the SR117, that it's got just a beefier, it picks up a little bit more of the drum's presence without losing that high end attack and sparkle that you need out of a snare drum in most modern music situations. And it just has that warmth to it that that kind of, I'll call it the mid-range EQ, not even high mids. It's just that little bit of extra oomph in the middle that really kind of makes it speak. And I love that about these microphones. And so let's hear that again, because it sounded so nice, right? Yeah. So I love that about this microphone. I love the way it sounds, and that's super important. And this is basically flat on the EQ here, although I'm sure, converting to MP3 on the podcast changes some things or whatever. But the thing I love about this, as I mentioned, is the form factor. Whenever I get to a gig, I got to get out my snare mic, whatever that's going to be, and I need to get out a clamp, like the LP clamp or maybe the Stage Ninja clamp, to put it somewhere on the drum set, and then screw the microphone clip onto the thing, plug it in, and fine. It's fine, but that takes a little bit of time. And then I have to undo all that at the end of the gig. This mic has it all self-contained. It has a clamp. First of all, it's short barrel, like I said, so it stays out of the way. And it has a clamp on it. This clamp is built to clamp onto the rim of a drum, and it's strong enough to hold this microphone. This means I can't tell you. I use those rims mounts on my drum. So there's the rim and then there's kind of the floating mount system. And engineers always want to, like, they can't clip their drum mics around the rim because the floating system is right there in the way of that. And so they're trying to like clamp it onto the floating mount system, but that's never the same size as the rim, and the clip either doesn't work or it doesn't fit because it's too small or it's too big and it sort of sloshes around. Like sometimes you got to use gaff tape or whatever. Non-optimal. This literally like pressure mounts to the top of the rim of the drum. And once it's on there, it just holds. And I shook the drum around. I actually picked the drum up and shook it with this on there. It didn't go anywhere. This is designed. This is one of the iterative designs, right? Like somebody didn't like the way that things had been done in the past. And now here's the way we do them. And if you're watching the video, you can, you can see with this picture here that, oh, maybe you can't see with the picture. I tried to zoom it in, but it really just sits right on the top of the rim. So it's not, and in its entirety, it is above the bottom of the rim of the drum, and it doesn't clamp around the bottom of the rim. So the whole thing, where sometimes that rims mount that really is going between the rim and the lugs, that isn't in the way. Like, it's fine. I have those mounts on my drums. I just put this right on there. I have but one complaint for Earthworks, and that's that the DK6 kit, well, it's called the DK6 because it comes with 3 microphones. So it comes with 2 of the overheads, the kick drum mic, and 3 of these DM17s. But I like to play with 3 toms, and this needs to also go on my snare drum, so I might need a 4th one of these. But that's an easy problem to solve because you can go to earthworks.com or to Amazon and pick one up. I think they're like $200. So great microphone. I'm super stoked about this thing. It is, it's the short form version of the SR117. So for everybody out there that wrote in, and there were a lot of you, that you're using the 117 on a snare and you wish you had another one for the vocals, well, you can move that to the vocal and just grab a DM17, put that on the snare. It'll clamp on easier. It'll save your time when you're setting up and tearing down, and it sounds great. And then you can get a couple more and put them on the toms and buy the kit. You're good to go. All right. That's basically what I have for today. Obviously, I love the emails when you send them in, feedback@giggabpodcast.com. So please keep those coming. But if there's one other thing that I could ask of you, it's to share the show. Share it with your bandmates. Share it with your friends. Share it on your favorite Facebook group, or just share it on your Facebook page, your Instagram or Twitter, or X rather, Mastodon, wherever you talk to people. Please take your favorite recent episode, or even your favorite not so recent episode. It doesn't matter. It's the same vibe that we do here, and share it. I would love that. And I would absolutely, people ask, how can I support the show? We haven't done a Patreon thing yet. I'm thinking about it. You can, of course, always visit our sponsors. That's bandzoogle.com and use promo code GigGabPod. But if you're wondering, hey, I love this show, what can I do? Tell your bandmates about it. If you listen on the way home from gigs or on the way to gigs, when you're at the gig, tell your bandmates what you do. Oh, yeah, I love this thing, Gig Gab. Or if you drive to the gigs together, listen together. I know some bands do that. In fact, I know our friends, the Coffis Brothers, do that. They actually tell us about that. And there's actually several bands that do that. So, yes, please share the show. I also come to giggabpodcast.com and sign up for the mailing list. I promise we don't spam you. We just send you the show notes that have all the links, so you can go and check out the new, Earthworks thing, or when we mention stuff in the show, it's all listed there. And it allows us to kind of stay in touch with each other, which I really like. With my other podcasts, I have, with Matt Geekab, I have a Discord community. I'm not sure, and that's freaking awesome for that show. I'm not sure what the right platform is for a community for this show. Do you think it's Facebook? I know we have our Facebook group. admittedly, I don't spend a lot of time there. So it hasn't, I mean, I post in there once a week or whatever, but that's different than hanging out there. I'm happy to hang out. In fact, I like hanging out with all of you. That's why I continued doing the show when Paul said he didn't have time anymore. So where should we hang out, I guess, is the question. Let me know. Feedback at giggabpodcast.com. Great episode coming up next week. My friend, Dr. Daniel Levitin, he is the one who wrote the book that Mike Schulte mentioned back in February called This Is Your Brain on Music. He wrote that like 20 years ago. Well, the sequel to that book, the evolution of that book, perhaps is a better way to say it, is coming out later this month. It is called I Heard There Was a Secret Chord, Music as Medicine. And it is a very cool book. I've gotten the opportunity to read it. And Dan and I, we talked for about an hour. We talked about the book, but that was probably the shortest segment of it. Dan is a fantastically interesting human. He is a musician to his core. He also is a trained and practicing cognitive cognitive neuroscientist. He's also a record producer. He plays with people like Victor Wooten and Bobby McFerrin and Joni Mitchell and Roseanne Cash, like Bob Weir. Like, he's got a lot of really interesting stories, and he's got this cool book coming out, and he's written several other cool books. So that's next week, a week from today, Monday, the 26th, that comes out, and I hope you're going to love that. What do you want to hear more of here on Gig Gab? We've mixed it up a little bit. We have musicians, we have neuroscientists, we have sound engineers, we have, we have other podcasters that are, freaks about sound like we are here. Well, is that a good mix? You like that? Listener numbers are up. So that's my metric until you tell me otherwise. And many of you have told me otherwise, but tell me, what do you like? What don't you like? What would you like to see more of? What would you like to see less of? Let me know. Feedback at giggabpodcast.com. I can't wait to hear from you. I know you get to hear from me all the time. I want to hear from you. I love hearing from you. Thanks for hanging out, folks. Someday we'll all get together in person and we'll say the following 3 words simultaneously in the same air together. But for now, always be performing. Have a great week. Have a great weekend full of gigs. I'll see you next week. Later.